Morning. It is not even 6:30 in the morning yet, but we are awake and ready because it is Gumball Rally Day. So let's go.
What were you doing?
With our Starbucks in hand, we left our favorite hotel that we had stayed the night at, which is Grand Legacy at the park, and we crossed the street over to the check-in point for Gumball Rally, which was at the Anaheim Hotel. All participants had to arrive at the Anaheim Hotel by 6:45 a.m. at the latest to check in to get rules and instructions for Gumball Rally. Once we were all checked in, we got a packet that had our wristbands and our team lanyards, and then the team captains were called to the front for instructions.
If you're standing up front, you need to have a blue wristband up, and only the blue wristbanded lucky victim.
This year's Gumball Rally was basically a giant game of old school Clue, so all the team captains were called to the front. We watched this old black and white video that MiceChat had created, and then it was time to be given the rules.
You do need to be paying attention to the rules and the game books, plural, and you'll hear more about that here in a second. So, who's ready for a grand old murder? The place next to the happiest place on earth, which is California Adventure. A character rubbed out, a crime scene hidden in plain sight, and a rogues gallery of suspects lurking in the shadows. That's where you come in, detectives. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, crack the case before time runs out. You'll need to figure out who pulled the dastardly deed, who got snuffed out, what weapon did the job, and where it all went down. But don't think that this is some leisurely stroll down Buena Vista Street. No, you'll be racing from one end of the park to the other and probably back and forth again. Riding attractions, gathering clues, and proving that you were on the scene. The questions? Some of them are straightforward. Some of them are downright zany. The kind that would make even the sharpest gumshoe second guess themselves. So be careful. And one more very important thing. Watch your backs. Murderous princesses have been seen in the area. Setting traps, throwing off investigators, and making sure that this case isn't solved too easily.
Dusty took about 20 minutes to give out rules before the game began over at Pixar Pier with a group photo. So while we're walking over to Pixar Pier, let me give you the most important rules of participating in this year's Gumball Rally. The first and most important rule of this year's Gumball Rally was that cell phones were not allowed. Participants were not allowed to use their cell phones to Google any information or use the Disneyland app. You were not allowed to check wait times or use mobile order. None of that was allowed for this game. The only exception was that creators were allowed to use cell phones to take pictures of teams and help share to social media, and the team captain of each team was allowed to use their phone to take and post a photo if that was something that was required in your game booklet. Other important rules were that you had to keep your team together at all time, and you were not allowed to get any assistance when riding rides. Teams were not allowed to use any form of lightning lane, single rider, or buddy pass, and were not allowed to accept help from cast members to win this game. And the third rule was that your team had to stay together. You could not split up to try to answer questions.
You have your first packet here. You can have one packet. Choose wisely. You don't get to choose. Just grab a packet and go.
At 8:09 a.m., we had our first packet in hand. The packet we started with was blue, and that contained clues to solve the location of the crime. This was the first time we had competed in Gumball Rally, and the first time we had obviously seen this packet, so we did not know what to expect, but we opened the packet and saw that there was a bunch of different locations we were going to have to go to complete this first packet. There were 2 pages of locations that we had to find, and on the right-hand side, we did see that Knickknacks was mentioned, and that was on Pixar Pier right by where the photo was taken, so we headed there first. We walked straight into Knickknacks and started looking for the window banners with sketches so that we could find the numeric code on the cell with Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head. Luckily, we were able to find that answer very quickly, and then we decided that our next stop was going to be the Pixar Pal Around because it was close to Knickknacks, and we knew that we could use the time that we had to wait in line to go on that ride to strategize our next move. This ended up being an excellent first choice for us. It took about 10 or 15 minutes to complete this ride overall, but we used the time that we were actually on the ride and the time that we waited for the ride to look through the booklet and figure out an order in which we wanted to try to go on rides and answer the clues so that we were not running around all across the park. Now, as you can see in this book, to keep the game fair, you did have to either post a photo or answer a question to prove that you went on the ride. Pixar Pal Around required a photo to prove that you were on the ride, so we got that photo posted to Instagram while we were still on the ride, and then once we were off the ride, we waved to a bunch of other Gumball Rally participants who were trying to do the same thing as us, and we headed to our next spot, which was Jumping Jellyfish. For Jumpin' Jellyfish, one member of the team rode the ride while another stayed down below to take the photo. And something to keep in mind about Gumball Rally is that if it says it required a photo, then that photo had to be uploaded and timestamped to Instagram in order for you to get your point. The next stop that we had listed in our strategy was to go on the Little Mermaid ride. And for this ride, you didn't need to take a photo to prove that you were on the ride, but you did have to answer a trivia question. And a very important rule of Gumball Rally is that you must ride the ride to get the point. So even if you know the answer to the trivia question, if you get caught answering the question but not riding the ride, you will be disqualified and cannot win. We counted 3 total turtles that were dancing on this ride. 2 were dancing in the Under the Sea room, and 1 was dancing in the very last room where Ariel and Eric get married. So we wrote down the answer to that trivia question and quickly headed to San Francisco. In San Francisco, we had to head to the bakery tour and answer another trivia question and figure out who said good bread, good food, good people. Luckily for us, this was actually a quote on the wall that we found very quickly, and then it was off to our next stop.
All right, the park has been open for 53 minutes. We have answered about half of the questions in our first book, and we're heading towards the other half of our answers so we can get our next book. We have to answer 4 books in order to win this game.
Next up, we quickly went into Cars Land to look at the Radiator Springs Curios and find the number on a license plate for our next trivia answer. We were very excited at how quickly we found that answer, and then we headed from Cars Land into Avengers Campus to look for the cell phone provider for Ant-Man's cell phone. This was one of the questions where our Disney knowledge really helped us out because we go to Avengers Campus a lot, so we already knew the location of Ant-Man's cell phone, and it was very easy to find the answer to this question. Next, it was time to head over into Grizzly Peak, where there were 2 trivia questions that we needed to answer. Luckily for us, we were able to knock out these trivia questions in about 5 minutes because the location of the answers were actually right next to each other. One answer was at Humphreys, and the second answer was at the lockers that were right next door to Humphreys. Once we had those answers, it was time to dash next door to Grizzly River Run, which was the first point in the game where we started to get a little bit confused. We were confused because one of the rules that we were told was that you had to ride every ride listed if there was a trivia question attached to the ride. And if you didn't ride the ride, you would be disqualified if you just answered the question without riding. But our packet asked about a sign on the Grizzly River Run ride, but the ride was obviously closed. We didn't want to get this answer wrong though, so we walked all around the ride trying to see if we could see the sign we were supposed to answer the trivia question for, but we could not see the sign in any area around Grizzly River Run, so we decided to give up on that question and assume that it was a trick. We were getting pretty close to being done with our packet at this point, but our next spot was to head into Trolley Treats to look and see if we could find out how much it cost for frolicking fish candy. We found the answer on a vintage candy machine inside Trolley Treats, and with that answer, we had gone to all 6 locations that we needed to go to get the clue for the location of the murder. There were still a couple of things we hadn't answered in the book yet though, and we wanted to do those, so next we headed into Hollywoodland to Sorcerer's Workshop. Once we had the answer for Sorcerer's Workshop, there was actually only one thing left to do before we could solve the clue, and that was ride Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. But once we saw that the line for Guardians was 75 minutes, we decided not to ride, because each ride in this game was only worth 1 point, but solving the clues was worth 2 points, so we decided to spend our time trying to figure out the location of the crime. To find the location, we took all of the gold underlined numbers and letters that were part of our earlier clues, and we transcribed them into this number. The number was N515GP. And we had to figure out where in the park that number was located. There were some hints at the top of the clue sheet that told you 6 areas of the park where you might find this number, and after checking Cars Land and Oswald's, we eventually figured out that the number we were looking for and the location of the crime was at the plane in Grizzly Airfield.
We are 1 hour and 40 minutes into the park being open, and we have completed book 1.
We were also told during instruction that once you complete your book, you were to head to Hollywoodland into the award winners seating area, and towards the back, you would find the MiceChat crew who would trade out the book that you finished for your next book. And you want to turn in your books as quickly as possible because even though you have until 6 p.m., if there's a tie, whoever turns in their book earlier wins. Once we turned in book 1, we got to pick the color we wanted for book 2. We picked purple, which ended up being the victim. As soon as we opened the book, we saw that Soarin' was a ride that was listed in this book that we needed to go on, and we had just walked by Soarin' and the line did not look very long, so we grabbed the book and took it over to Soarin', and we spent the time that we waited in line for Soarin' going through the book and organizing what rides and clues we wanted to do in order so that we did not have to run all around the park. And the interesting thing about playing Gumball Rally is that it's really done on the honor system. There are people walking around trying to make sure that teams don't cheat, but it would be pretty easy for me, honestly, to have answered this question without riding the ride. But that's not the point of Gumball Rally. The point is to ride the rides and play the game. And it's fun to see if you can do more than other teams in the time that you're given. And you are only given a short amount of time, which we definitely had in the back of our minds the whole time we were playing. So when we were done with Soarin' Over the World, we were starting to get hungry, but we were not going to stop to eat because that takes time. And you weren't allowed to mobile order anything because you weren't allowed to use the Disneyland app. So instead, when we walked off of Soarin' Over the World, we saw a cart that had red vines and it also had some hard seltzers. So we grabbed 2 drinks and some red vines.
All right, we are not stopping because we want to win Gumball Rally. So this is our lunch. We have some red vines, and the cart that sold red vines had seltzers. So we're doing that. We're making a run for it. We're going to get as many points as possible.
Our next stop was also in Grizzly Peak at Big Al's suitcase that was next to him, and unfortunately, we got the answer to this trivia question wrong, and it ended up being our downfall and the reason that we did not overall get the victim right for book 2. We only counted that there were 3 stickers for cities on this suitcase, but in reality there was 4 because the people who made the game said that Moonshin should have been an answer for a city, and that meant that our overall total at the end was off by 1 number, which meant that we did not get the victim correct, and so we did not get the points for the clue on this book. Obviously, we didn't know that at the time, so we continued in the game like we had gotten all of the answers right. Our next stop was just past Big Al in Redwood Creek Challenge Trail, where we had to tell you the order of the totem poles, and then we went down to Buena Vista Street to Oswald's gas station to count how many gas pumps there were. We figured that answer out very quickly because there are only 2 gas pumps at Oswald's Tires, and then our next stop was back into Hollywoodland, where it felt like we had been in and out of all morning, but we needed to go back into Animation Academy to find out what reel they show after they show the Pocahontas reel. This was one of the times during the day where we got lucky, and luck does play a big part in Gumball Rally. As soon as we walked into Animation Academy, the Pocahontas reel was already playing, so we only had to wait 1 minute to find out that Sleeping Beauty comes after Pocahontas, and then we went next door to the Disney Junior Dance Party because we had seen on the sign on the way to Animation Academy that there was a show starting at 11:15.
Let me guess, you got a button for that too? Got a button for that? It's snowing!
Next up, we headed over to Mater's Junkyard Jamboree, but we were starting to get a little bit worried about time because ride lines were getting longer because it was getting later in the day, and we'd already been working on book 2 for more than 2 hours, which was already longer than it took us to complete all of book 1. We had a good time on Mater's though, and this was another ride that required you to upload a picture to Instagram, so we rode the ride, uploaded our photo, and then headed over to our next trivia question, which was in San Francisco again. San Francisco was another area where our Disney parks knowledge came in handy because we already knew where the robot banners were, so they were very easy to find, and it was very quick to get our answer and head to our next clues over on Pixar Pier. We quickly got our answer to the question about how many otters were on this sign, and then headed over to ride Midway Mania, but saw that the line for Midway Mania was an hour, and we did not think that an hour was a good use of our time at that point because we were still on book 2 and the game was almost halfway over. Instead, we decided to spend our time finishing up our last book by answering one more trivia question at the Pixar Pier Games and riding one more ride that required a photo, which was Golden Zephyr. Luckily, Golden Zephyr was actually open because it does often close due to wind, and the wait time was only 10 minutes, which gave us just enough time to finish our game booklet while we waited to get on the ride. We used this time to figure out who we thought the victim was, and the way that worked was we added up all of the numbers that we had found in the trivia questions, and we came up with the total 15. Then we found the character who had 15 letters in their name. So we thought the answer was Dame Feline Pearl, but we were actually short one number, and the correct victim should have been Scarlet Showgirl. Regardless, we still got a lot of points in this book for other tasks and rides that we had completed. So we rode the ride, finished our book, and then it was time to head back over to Award Wieners to trade out our second book for our third book.
12:30, and we just completed booklet number 2 for our giant, basically game of Clue here at Gumball Rally. So now we know who was murdered, and we also know where it happened. And so now we're gonna go get the third book. We only have till 6 o'clock to complete this game. So we did not answer every single question in this book or the last one, because I think a big part of this game is strategy, and you have to decide what's important and what's worth your points. So on to the next book.
So of course we had to go all the way from Pixar Pier back over to Hollywoodland to Award Wieners to turn in book number 2 and exchange it for book number 3. And this time we picked the red book, which turned out to be the book for The Weapon. We opened book 3 and immediately saw that one of the rides we needed to ride was Monsters, Inc., which was right next to Award Wieners, so we jumped in that line right away. And we used our time in that line to create a strategy again. We thought that we were going to do so good at book 3 because as soon as we opened it and I read the question about the weapon, I already knew the answer to what the weapon was. We'll go back to why I knew the answer in a second, but we did use our time very well in the Monsters, Inc. line to create a strategy of how we wanted to ride the rides to get the attraction points. And we finished Monsters, Inc. by getting the answer that we needed to get, hopped off of Monsters, Inc. and headed across the street over to Turtle Talk with Crush. Unfortunately, Turtle Talk with Crush does only run every 30 minutes approximately, so we did have to wait for the 1:30 show to get the answer to our trivia question for Turtle Talk with Crush, and once we were done with that, we headed over next door to the Red Car Trolley. Now, the Red Car Trolley is actually one of my favorite things about California Adventure, and I actually dressed up as the Red Car Trolley for Halloween a couple years ago and did a lot of studying of what the Red Car Trolley looked like, so I already knew that there was a Wig-Wag sign inside the Red Car Trolley. I also knew that along with that sign, there was an Elias & Co. banner because all of the signs are things that are on Buena Vista Street. But just to confirm, when we were done with Turtle Talk with Crush, we headed over to ride the Red Car Trolley next and confirm our answer. I was right that the Wig-Wag sign and the Elias & Co. sign are inside the Red Car Trolley, and the only option of murder weapon that is sold inside Elias & Co. is mini ears, so we knew our murder weapon was mini ears, and we figured that out before we rode the trolley. And it was good that we figured out the answer because riding the trolley turned out to be a total nightmare. Because Gumball Rally happened to fall on the very last day that the Red Car Trolley was going to be operating, and the Red Car Trolley had to stop operating every hour or so for the Lunar New Year procession, so it was incredibly hard to get on the trolley. We did wait in the Red Car Trolley line for about 20 minutes, but then we were told that they were going to have to stop running the trolley for a while because of the Lunar New Year procession, and the line was really long, so we actually left the Red Car Trolley line and headed to Pixar Pier again so that we could ride Jesse's Critter Carousel. And I do think we made the right choice because each attraction is only worth 1 point, whether it's the carousel or the trolley. After Critter Carousel, it was time to ride Silly Symphony Swings, which worked out perfectly because the ride had actually been closed for a little bit and was just reopening as we walked by, so we were able to walk right onto the ride. This was another ride that required one partner to take the photo and one partner to ride, so my amazing partner Lacey stayed down at the bottom of the ride to take the picture so we could post it to Instagram to get our point. After Silly Symphony, we had to make a choice. We still had 3 big rides left in book 3, but we hadn't even started book 4 yet. So we decided we were going to do one more ride and then pick up book 4. We ended up deciding to go back and give Red Car Trolley another try because it was the last day of the attraction, so we figured we might as well ride it if we were going to have to wait in a long line for something anyway. But one bonus of picking Red Car Trolley is that right next door to where you line up for Red Car Trolley, they did have mimosas at one of the carts and there was no line, so we did grab a mimosa and get in line to wait for our last ride on the Red Car Trolley. And this line ended up being the longest line that we waited in all day. Whether it was because people wanted to ride the Red Car Trolley because it was its last day, or people were riding it because they were participating in the Gumball Rally, either way, we waited exactly an hour before we could get on the Red Car Trolley. We had an amazing set of cast members who were operating the Red Car Trolley on this day as well, and I do think it was totally worth it to pick this as one of our rides, even though we did have to wait a long time to do it.
The fabulous, magical Red Car Trolley 623! Let's give it a hand! Yes! You were on board line down here, we're heading all the way up to the main entrance. Now do the bell too. That was the whistle, yeah. Oh! Now you know how to drive! Good job, conductor. See?
All right, it's 4 o'clock. We finished book 3 and we have 2 hours left to do the final book. 2 hours left and we are starting our final and 4th book.
We took a quick second to look through book number 4 and saw that there were 2 things that we could look for in Avengers Campus, so we headed there first. For book 4, we had to find the murderer, and the way that we needed to do that was by proving that the suspects were lying about their alibis. So there were several different suspects who had said that they had left things all over California Adventure, and you had to check and see if the things they said they left were in the place they said they left them. Otherwise, that person's alibi wasn't true. We started in web suppliers to check out an alibi, but unfortunately that alibi was true. We knew that we needed to try to ride some more rides and come up with a strategy, and we saw that Web Slingers was actually only 40 minutes and we were already there, so we got in the line and started working on what we were going to do with our last 2 hours of Gumball Rally. Unfortunately, we got a little bit too much time to strategize in Web Slingers because not only did the ride take closer to an hour to actually ride, but it also broke down for a few minutes while we were on it. We did have a strategy when we got off the ride though, and that was to start by going to check alibis in the Grizzly Peak area because there were 3 different suspects with alibis in Grizzly Peak. We ended up getting so lucky by going with this strategy though, because we actually only had to check 1 location in Grizzly Peak to determine the murderer. The first spot that we checked was Humphreys, where there was a station wagon that was supposed to have a San Francisco map on the dash, but it actually had a greater Los Angeles freeway map on the dash, so we knew that the alibi was false. We were so happy that we figured out who the murderer was so quickly and that we still had a little bit of time left to do another attraction. This is the part of the day where having a Disneyland app would have been so nice to check wait times, but we didn't, so we had to make our best guess, and we guessed that Emotional Whirlwind would have the shortest wait time. We tried to hurry over to Pixar Pier as fast as we could, but we did end up getting stopped behind the Lunar New Year processional for a few minutes, and by the time we got to Emotional Whirlwind, we weren't really sure if we were going to be able to ride it and still be able to turn in our book by 6 o'clock. A 30-minute wait time was definitely cutting it close to return our book by 6 o'clock, and if we didn't return our book by 6 o'clock, we would start to lose points. But we really wanted to win, so we decided to risk it.
We did it, down to the wire. We just got off our last ride at 5:45 and we are running to turn in book number 4. But we did almost everything that Gumball Rally asked us to do. So we did at least 12 attractions. We ran in circles around the parks looking for low wait times and answers to clues. Now it's time to turn in our books and see if we won.
There were still quite a few attractions that we had not been able to accomplish in book 4, but we still felt really good about our chances of winning because we had done so good in the first 3 books and we had solved all 4 clues, or so we thought. Obviously, as I told you earlier, we did get 1 clue wrong, but we still did so many attractions. And finally, after 10 hours in the park and our book was turned in, we left California Adventure and went to grab dinner and a quick drink before it was time to return to the Anaheim Hotel for the award ceremony.
We think we won. I think we won. They're going to announce it in a second.
Team in 3rd place, and they did really well this year. So Miss Kim, from Getaway Today, our sponsor, you want to tell us in 3rd place who should come up to the stage.
In 3rd place is our first time gumballer.
All right, use your booming gumball voice.
And this was the perfect way to end our day. We got 3rd place in the creator category competing in Gumball Rally. And we are so impressed at how well we did since it was our first time ever competing. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you're not already, make sure to like and subscribe here at our page, Adventure Isle, for lots more theme park content and fun. And of course, to see us compete and do this all over again next year at Gumball Rally.